Congressman Walter Jones, our friend, live in the studio with us for one of his periodic visits. I guess you're home on 4th of July break, so
absolutely.
Happy 4th of July to you.
Henry, you got a nice tan. I know you're doing a lot of work inside. I can tell that. So,
I don't try to get a
good.
tan, but I do play outside with my grandchildren, and I do play a little golf, and so it does.
A little boating, too, along the way.
God has... He has blessed me with the pigment that does tan.
True.
I make no effort. But the good news is I also don't have to use much sunscreen, although I should probably. But
well,
anyway.
I had a very wonderful opportunity yesterday. I spoke to the Greenville Kiwanis Club at lunch, and last night the Greenville Rotary Club. So I've had an opportunity yesterday to share my thoughts with two different clubs that do a lot of civic work here in the area, as well as one of the groups, the Rotary Club, I think has an international program to wipe out polio.
Mm-hmm. So, they're doing a good job. We have
people.
some really good folks in some of the local civic organizations. I don't know if you were listening to me out there in the lobby, but I got off on the fact that, number one, we still don't know when the presidential primary date is going to be in North Carolina. We think now it's going to be somewhere between March 1st and March 16th. I think there's a House bill that passed that has it on the 16th of March, but the Senate doesn't agree with the House on anything these days, so I don't know what's going to happen with that. But hopefully we're going to have a presidential primary, and we're going to be the largest state with the first primary, which is going to bring a lot of attention
Absolutely.
to North Carolina and eastern North Carolina. I just mentioned that Ted Cruz's father is going to be in Greenville in 2 weeks. You already had your friend Senator Rand Paul here. I was telling, I don't know if you heard my little rant about Rand Paul, but I said, Rand Paul seems to be a guy who may emerge. His father comes off as a little bit too libertarian, but I think Rand Paul is a lot. He has the ability to communicate his feelings and thoughts a little better, I think. And I know you're very close to both he and his father.
Well, I would agree with your assessment. Ron, the father, is very outspoken about his beliefs. And he said, if you don't believe with me, to hell with you. That's just his attitude.
Yeah, right.
The Senator, Rand Paul's persona is a lot different. And I'm real excited. We had a meeting of the members of the House who were supporting Rand about 6 weeks ago in his Washington headquarters, and I was real pleased. He came and talked with us and gave us some ideas, obviously not in detail, but what their plans are, how they're looking forward to moving around this country. And I was real excited. Henry, I agree with you, whether people agree with me or you. I believe that Rand is going to be in the final push of three. I really do.
Yeah.
And my hope is he'll be number one. But time will tell. There's going to be many days and many debates and a lot of candidates to talk about different issues. So, but I think he brings what I said at both the Kiwanis Club and the Rotary Club last night. The reason that I believe that Rand's the right candidate because he can articulate his message.
He does.
And let me give you one quick example. There's a bishop in Philadelphia named Bishop Ned. He and I became friends. He comes to Washington every so often. He's got a church in Philadelphia. And he comes to Washington very often, and he always wants to meet with me because of my issue about allowing chaplains to close their prayer in the name of Jesus Christ in the military outside the church on base. And he came down about 2 months ago, and he said, Congressman, he didn't have an appointment, but I always try to get him in. And he said, I really like Rand Paul. Is there any way you can get me a contact with the Rand Paul campaign? And so I called the contact and I asked them if they would please get someone to contact Bishop Ned, as that he wanted to have a conversation. He really believes in what Rand Paul's saying. Well, what happened was so that a couple weeks later, Rand was in Philadelphia to give a speech, and he did meet with Bishop Ned. And I think that the point of that, Bishop Ned is an African American. And the point of that story is that I believe that Rand will appeal to many, I don't know how many, people of African Americans in this country, and that's going to be very important, even if you get 1% or 2% of the vote.
Well, that's the thing. He appeals to those of us who are conservative in nature, but he's also turning on the young folks. And
Absolutely.
he is the only Republican that is out there saying, you know what, we've got to reach out to the African American community. We now have a black head of the North Carolina Republican Party.
Absolutely.
Things are changing, and I think that a lot of folks in the black community are realizing that the old ideas about politics have not helped their people. I mean, if you just take a look at how the city of Detroit has responded to an all-Democratic approach. I mean, and
Absolutely.
have the people in Detroit been helped by that?
Not at all. Not at all.
Absolutely not. So I think there's people are realizing there's got to be another way, and so they're listening to Rand Paul and the black community. Young people are listening to Rand Paul. And I think that's what the Republican Party has got to do if we're going to survive in the future.
I agree. And Henry, the nice thing about it, I think the first week or second week in August, I think Fox News is going to have the top 10 candidates who are to have a debate, which obviously is early. We got a few months to go. But as you say, in North Carolina, maybe in the middle of March, we're going to have our primary. So I think it's going to be very interesting. And all the polling I'm seeing lately, of course, what the polls mean today, 2 years away, but still they're important to be in that top 3 or 4. And
Yeah.
I'm real pleased.
There were a couple of Supreme Court final decisions that came down last week, one on gay marriage, which legalizes gay marriage nationwide. The other legitimized and finally, once and for all, said that Obamacare is going to be the health care law of the land and that there was no unconstitutional parts of it. I still find it hard to believe, but haven't had a chance to hear your reaction to. You want to react to those both of those decisions?
Well,
by the
I
Supreme
will.
Court?
We came out with a public statement about the decision to disregard the words of God. A nation that was founded on Judeo-Christian values, and you don't have to be a religious person, but you still have to, in my opinion, acknowledge that the words in the Bible are God's words and God's direction for America and the world, quite frankly. And when you defame the words of God, I think you are a nation in trouble.
And you feel like the Supreme Court decision on gay marriage did that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I believe in the relationships, civil unions, but it's pretty Old Testament and New Testament. It's pretty clear. Man marries woman. Woman marries man. That's in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And if you believe in the Bible, that is clear. That is absolutely clear. And I think the Supreme Court was wrong to make that kind of decision. Of course, they've made so many, like I think Citizens United was a bad decision, but the worst decision of all was what they did last week.
How about the decision on Obamacare? We could debate all millennium whether or not this is the right thing to do for people with regard to what their health care needs are and what the nation needs. But I still, for the life of me, I said from the beginning, I don't understand how the government can tax someone, can penalize someone in their taxes for not doing something that they don't want to do that has to do with their own well-being. It's unprecedented. It's never been done before. The idea that you get an additional penalty in your income tax if you don't do what the government tells you to do about health care. It's an unprecedented decision. I really thought that they would find that part of the bill and the law unconstitutional, but
Henry,
they didn't.
As we've heard the complaint for years and years, another example of legislating from the bench.
No doubt.
And I can hardly even comment to what you're saying because I agree with you. It's just that, talking about the presidential campaigns, every president possibly during that 4 or 8 years will have an opportunity to appoint a jurist to the United States Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. And we have seen, I think it was President Reagan who nominated Kennedy, and believing that, Kennedy would look at the Constitution from the eyes of a conservative, and Roberts as well. So I don't know. It really is frustrating to the American people, and I am a states' rights type congressman. If the state can make the decision, I want to give it back to the state and take it out of the hands of the federal government. And yes, I am like you and many, many people throughout this country very disappointed in the two decisions made by the United States Supreme Court.
Now, let's talk about some other issues. You always bang the drum of this out-of-control national debt that we have, which is now up to $18 trillion and counting. The CBO came out with a report a couple of weeks ago that basically said that, what we keep hearing, what you keep saying is, something's got to give.
Right.
What's the latest on that?
Well, Henry, 2 weeks ago, the headlines in the Washington Times, CBO warns of financial death spiral from debt. Report urges Congress to act on taxes and spending. And they say right here in the first sentence, rising federal debt threatens to choke economic growth within a decade. I mean, I blame both parties. I do. I complain about my party spending money. We passed all these bills this year. Here we are in the 1st of July. We have passed over $700 billion in legislation that's not paid for. Now, I think most of that legislation, they're tax extenders primarily. I think most of that legislation will be vetoed by the president. But the point is, we are passing bills known as tax extenders that are not paid for. That if they did become law, it would add $700 billion to the debt of our nation.
Good Lord.
And you see, everyone that watches your show or listens to your show, they know what's happening in Greece this week. They are in a possible total collapse of a country. And we're not that far behind. As you said, we're $18.2 trillion in debt. And I've said many times on your show and every other show, when Bill Clinton in the year 2000, when he left office, we were $5.9 trillion in debt. Here we are 15 years later. That's almost triple the debt since he was in office. It is triple.
The number gets to be mind-boggling when you get to $18 trillion. And, you think, well, how can you ever get it under control? But even if we can just start turning it in the other direction, if we can just stop increasing it and start cutting into it some.
Stop the bleeding.
Even a measly little $1 trillion would help. I mean, it seems like there's no constitution. That's the wrong word. There's no
willpower.
Desire and willpower to do it, yeah.
Well, that's Rand Paul about 2 months ago, not in a speech but in a comment, said, why in the world does America keep spending more money than it takes in?
Yeah.
Well, that's because both parties want to spend more money than they take in. In September this year, the president will ask Mr. Obama, his buddy, and ask Mr. McConnell to raise the debt ceiling so that our nation can borrow more money to pay the bills from last year because we don't have the money in the bank account to pay last year's bills. This thing is just out of control. And as you know, I've said many times on your show, under President Bush, we raised the debt ceiling 7 out of 8 years that he was the President of the United States. For President Obama, we have raised the debt ceiling 7 times in 6 years. It just has got to stop. And I've spoke to the 2 civic clubs yesterday. I brought this up, and the questions at the end of my little talk, they would say, well, what do you think we need to do? I just stop it. Mm-hmm. Say to the president, we're not going to raise the debt ceiling. Well, then you get everyone from Wall Street say, oh, well, you're going to crash the market. You're going to crash the market. But at some point in time, something's got to be done.
Isn't the market going to crash if we don't do it?
Well, I think the people in Greece that play the market will tell you it has crashed.
Yeah.
And even what's happening in Greece has impacted the Wall Street here in America. Very
concerning. Congressman Walter Jones, alive in the studio. What else is on your mind this morning? We got about 2 minutes left here in this segment.
Well, Henry, I have been a strong supporter of having an alternative to the high cost of running for office. It's a reform bill by John Sarbanes. I'm on the bill. It probably won't happen in my lifetime, but at some point in time, the American people have got to demand that those of us running for office that we stop taking all this money from special interests, primarily the millionaires and the billionaires who buy candidates. I hope that will happen in your grandson's lifetime.
You're going to be facing another challenge next year. We're already hearing names pop up. There was even talk about the Secretary of Transportation of North Carolina running against you in some article. He came out and issued a statement that he basically said, "I was recruited to run, but I'm not going to." I don't know who he was listening to, but I can tell you if he'd listened to any of us here in Eastern North Carolina, we would have said, "You're going to try to beat Walter Jones, bring your wallet," which is what I always say.
Well, Henry, I am the establishment in Washington will always run someone against me because I am going to vote my conscience for the good of the people of Eastern North Carolina, and there's a price to pay when you do what is right.
Yeah.